Under that mass of students in the center, there's a police car. It's been there since noon. The demonstrating students have blocked its departure. Inside the car is a demonstrator, arrested at noon when he refused to stop manning a Corps-sponsored political action table, so-called, in front of the building, or to identify himself to officials of the dean's office. Demonstration leaders demand his release and the reinstatement of 8 who were suspended last night before they'll allow the police car to pass. This is the kind of activity which the university prohibits and which led to the dismissal of 8 students last night.
All of us. 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 You can't just pick on one. You can't pick on one. Don't be so kind. I am resting. Now, you're either going to come with me or all of us. All of us. You arrest us all. We're all manning the table. We're all going to jail with it.
Let's swing over so we can right in.
Stay in your seat.
You know, get it to this place and I'll sit down next to you. Would you come with me?
We must really feel very, very sorry for these poor policemen here, you know. Good men, they're family men, you know. They have a job to do. That's right, they have a job to do. Yeah, that's very good. It's very like, you know, Adolf Eichmann. He had a job to do. He fit into the machinery. Very good. They fit into the machinery.
Inside Sproul Hall, there's another group of students camped in the hallway outside the offices of Dean of Students Arlie Williams. They say they'll stay here until their demands are met. And right now they're taking a vote on whether to let 2 policemen who happen to be stranded at the end of the hall walk down the corridor and go outside, presumably to get a cup of coffee. Some of the students proposed, only half in jest, that if the university officials just let this thing run its course until tomorrow night, it'll have to end then. Folk singer Joan Baez is coming to campus for a concert at the Greek Theater. Everybody will be over there listening to her. No more demonstration. Robert Simmons reporting from the University of California in Berkeley.
Well, I think his role has been an offensive one. As a matter of fact, I believe that Governor Wallace has helped to incite the violence that has taken place in Birmingham. Several days ago, I saw him on television, where he was discussing the bombings that had taken place in the city of Birmingham. He said there have been so many bombings here, and the FBI has been all over the place investigating. They haven't found anybody. Well, this to me seemed to be an open invitation to people to try other bombings. Shortly after his remarks, there was the bombing of the church.
State troopers, their role has not necessarily been one of helping to stop this in every case, has it?
Quite to the contrary, the state troopers in Alabama have been among the worst offenders in police brutality. I've seen them not only in Birmingham, when they terrorized and intimidated the whole Negro community, beating up Negroes at random, pushing women down, knocking them down. I saw them in Gadsden, Alabama, where they were using those electric cattle prods, and where they were brutally beating people whom they arrested.
Of course, there have been many requests now for federal assistance in Birmingham. There was a report out of Washington that the legality of sending additional federal aid would be questionable. What would be your view on that?
Well, I'd see no question of the legality of sending in U.S. Marshals. U.S. Marshals 2 years ago were sent into Montgomery. They were sent into Birmingham at a later date, and I think they can be sent into Birmingham now. There'd be no question at all. They are clearly under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice and the Attorney General, and they ought to be sent in.
Are there responsible citizens groups in the city of Birmingham who could work these problems out with some help of that fact?
Well, there are persons of goodwill in Birmingham, not only Negro but white as well. Some of the businessmen, some of the clergy. But they certainly need support from the federal government because they are faced with the terror and the intimidation of the lunatic fringe of the segregationists.
The whole world is talking about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the divine solution he received from the God of our forefathers. Not your God, but from the God of our forefathers. Not a temporary solution which will benefit only the hand-picked upper-class Negroes, but a solution divinely designed to solve the plight of the black masses in this country permanently and forever. The government does not want our people to listen and understand the solution that God has given the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The government is against Mr. Muhammad because the government is against our God. In order to trick our people away from God's true solution, the government is trying to deceive our people with a false solution, a phony solution, a deceitful solution called token integration. I may add, whenever you get on the bus or the subway or the streetcar and you have to use a token, that token is not the real thing, but it is the substitute for the real thing. And wherever you have a token, you have a substitute. And wherever you have token integration, you don't have anything but a substitute for integration, and there's no real integration anywhere in North America, north, south, east, or west, not even in San Francisco, Oakland, or Berkeley. Has the government's efforts to bribe our people with token integration made our plight better, or has it made it worse? When you try to integrate the white community in search of better housing, the whites there fled to the suburbs, and the community that you thought would be integrated soon deteriorated into another all-black slum. What happened to the liberal whites? Why did they flee? We thought that they were supposed to be our friends. And why did the neighborhood deteriorate only after our people moved in? It is the tricky real estate agents posing as white liberal friends who encourage our people to force their way into white communities. And then they themselves sell these integrated houses at such high prices that our people again are forced to take in roomers to offset the high house notes. This creates in the new area the same overcrowded conditions, and the new community soon deteriorates into the same slum conditions from which we thought we had escaped. The only one who has benefited is the white real estate agent who poses as our friend, as a liberal, and who sells us the house in a community destined by his own greedy schemes to become nothing but a high-priced slum area. Today our people can see that integrated housing has not solved our problem. At best, it was only a temporary solution, one in which only the wealthy, hand-picked Negroes found temporary benefit. After the 1954 Supreme Court desegregation decision, the same thing happened when our people tried to integrate the schools. All the white students disappeared into the suburbs. Now the caliber of what our people thought was to be an integrated school has fallen to the same level of the slum school from which we thought we had escaped. Just as efforts to integrate housing failed miserably, efforts to integrate schools have been an even more miserable failure. Having failed to get integrated housing and failed to get integrated schools, now the Negro leaders are demanding integrated jobs. That is, they are demanding a certain quota or percentage of white people's jobs. First, the Negro leadership demanded the white man's house, and the whites vacated their rundown houses for us and built new homes for themselves out in the suburbs. Then the Negro leader demanded seats for our children in the white man's schools. The whites evacuated the schools as our children moved in, and they built modern schools for themselves in the suburbs. But now the Negro leadership is demanding the white man's job. Can the whites vacate their jobs like they did their homes and their schools and move to the suburbs and create more jobs? No, not without violence and bloodshed. The same white liberals who used to praise our people for their patient, nonviolent approach have now become openly impatient and violent themselves in defense of their own jobs, not only in the South, but also in the North, even here in the Bay Area. For 33 years, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been warning us that the time would come when the white man would not have enough jobs for himself, much less enough jobs for our people. So the present demand of our people for more of the white man's jobs must lead to violence and bloodshed. It may even lead to a race war, a bloody race war. And it is the government itself that is now pressing the people of this country into a racial bloodbath. But the white man is misjudging the times, and he's underestimating the American so-called Negro, because we're living in a new day. Our people are now a new people. That old Uncle Tom type Negro is dead. Our people have no more fear of anyone, no more fear of anything. We are not afraid to go to jail. We are not afraid to give our very life itself. And we're not afraid to take the lives of those who try to take our lives. We believe in a fair exchange. We believe in a fair exchange, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a head for a head, and a life for a life. If this is the price of freedom, we won't hesitate to pay the price. By trying to oppose the divine solution that God has given to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the American government will actually provoke another civil war. That is, this government, and especially that present administration in Washington, D.C., will provoke a civil war among whites by trying to force them to give up their jobs and homes and schools to our people. And our people will provoke a race war by trying to take the white man's jobs and his schools and his home away from him. This racial dilemma poses a serious problem for white America. Civil war between whites on the one hand, a race war between the whites and their 20 million ex-slaves on the other hand. And the entire dark world is watching, waiting to see what the American government will do to solve this problem once and for all. We must have a permanent solution. A temporary solution won't do. Tokenism will no longer suffice. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad has the only permanent solution. 20 million ex-slaves must be permanently separated from our former slave master and placed on some land that we can call our own. Then we can create our own jobs, control our own economy, solve our own problems, instead of waiting on the American white man to solve our problems for us. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that on our own land we can set up farms, factories, businesses. We can establish our own government and become an independent nation. And once we become separated from the jurisdiction of this white nation, we can then enter into trade and commerce for ourselves with other independent nations. This is the only solution. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that in our own land, we can establish our own agricultural system. We can grow food to feed our own people. We can raise cattle and use the hide, the leather, and the wool to clothe our people. We can dig the clay from the earth and make bricks to build homes for our people. We can turn the trees into lumber and furnish the homes for our own people. He says that we can dig the natural resources from the earth once we are in our own land. Land is the basis of all economic security. Land is essential to freedom, justice, and equality. Land is essential to true independence. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says we must be separated from the American white man, return to our own land where we can live among our own people. This is the only true solution. But just as the biblical government of Egypt under Pharaoh was against Moses because Moses had been directed by God to separate the Hebrew slaves from Pharaoh and lead them out of the house of bondage to a land of their own, today this modern house of bondage under the authority of the American government, opposes this modern Moses, opposes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's efforts to separate our people who have been made slaves here in this country and lead us to a land of our own. The government opposes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's efforts to wake us up, clean us up, and stand us on our own feet so we can follow him out of this house of bondage to our own land where we can live among our own people. Just as the government of biblical Egypt was against the God of the Hebrew slaves, today the American government is against the God of her Negro slaves, the God of our forefathers. And just as that Pharaoh tried to trick the Hebrew slaves into rejecting the offers of salvation from their God by deceiving them with false promises through hired magicians and carefully staged demonstrations like the recent ridiculous March on Washington, today this government is paying certain elements of the Negro leadership to deceive our people into thinking that we're going to get accepted soon into the mainstream of American life. The government is deceiving our people with false promises so we won't want to return to our own land and people. The government is saying, stay here. Don't listen to this Muhammad. We'll desegregate the lunch counters and the theaters and the parks and the toilets, meaning this public accommodation things where you can sit on a toilet with a white person or in a toilet with a white person. We'll give you more civil rights bills. We won't give you civil rights, but we'll give you civil rights bills. The government promises our people this only to keep you from listening to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and to stop us from waking up. They know that if we listen to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad long enough, we will begin to do our own thinking. He'll make us see, hear, think, and able to speak for ourselves. Whenever you become fed up in this country with the white man's brutality, and you get set to take matters in your own hands in order to defend yourself and your people, the same government, and again I repeat, especially that Catholic administration in Washington, D.C., tries to pacify our people with deceitful promises of tricky civil rights legislation that is never designed to be a true solution to our problem. Civil rights legislation will never solve our problems. The white liberals are nothing but political hypocrites who use our people as political footballs only to get bills passed that will increase their own power. The present proposed civil rights legislation will give the present administration dictatorial powers and make America a legal police state, but still won't solve the race problem. The present administration is only using civil rights as a political football to gain more legislation and power for itself. Our people are being used as pawns in the game of power politics by political hypocrites. They don't want our people to listen to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad because they know he will make us see them as they really are. So I say in my conclusion, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's message and solution is simple. He says, since we are not wanted in this country, let's pack our bags and go back home to our own people, to our own land. The propaganda of the American government is skillfully designed to make our people think that our people back home don't want us. Government propagandists tell us constantly, Africa is a jungle. Africans are savage and backward. They have no modern conveniences, and you're too much like us white folks. How could you live comfortably back there? This propaganda is government strategy against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, realizing that his mission is to teach our people the truth about our own kind, clean us up, and then return us to our own land and unite us with our own people. The American government turns us against our own kind in order to keep us from making a mass exodus out of this country where we can live at home among our own people. Therefore, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says American propaganda is designed to make us think that no matter how much hell we catch here, we're still better off in America than we'd be anywhere else. They want us to think we have no place else to go. And many of our so-called intellectuals who pose as our leaders and spokesmen actually believe that we have no place else to go. So their solution to our problem is that we stay here and continue to catch hell from the American white man. But the only permanent solution is complete separation or some land of our own, in a country of our own. All other courses will lead to violence and bloodshed. It will lead to the destruction of America, and it will also lead to the destruction of our people who fall for it. So his message is, flee for your lives and save yourself, and I thank you.
We went to the Capitol. We were there to deliver a message based upon our understanding of what racism is and how it's inflicted upon us in our communities here in America, and deliver this message to the world that we must arm ourselves, that we are in imminent danger, that the concentration camps in Tule Lake, in Arizona, and Oklahoma are now being rejuvenated, reset up for us, and we will defend ourselves. The Examiner made a report back here in the last Sunday's paper that we were anti-white, that we hold no bones, this is a quote, pick no bones about being anti-white. This is a bold-faced lie. We don't hate nobody because of their color. We hate oppression. We hate murder of black people in our communities. We hate the gross unemployment that exists in our communities. We hate black men being taken off into the military service to be fighting for racist, decadent American promise us freedom. In the Civil War, 186,000 black men fought in the military service, and we were promised freedom, and we didn't get it. In World War II, 350,000 black men fought, and we were promised freedom, and we didn't get it. In World War II, 850,000 black men fought, and we were promised freedom, and we didn't get it. In the Korean conflict, the so-called police action, a war, we fought there, and we didn't get it. Now here we go with the damn Vietnam War, and we still ain't getting nothing but racist police brutality, etc. We are against oppression.
Do something, we have to try to do it even if we finish.
Suck it falls, I guess. I don't know. Everybody's sitting down.
Good luck.
Yeah. That's another thing right there. Try to put it.
Before I introduce today's distinguished guests, I've been asked to make two very brief announcements. First of all, the Faculty Peace Committee is holding a conference this Friday and Saturday on the social responsibility of the intellectual. All meetings will be held in Wheeler Auditorium, beginning on Friday evening at 8 p.m. as the youngest man to win the Nobel Peace Prize, winning it at the age of 35. At the present time, in addition to his civil rights activities, he has been one of the leading critics of President Johnson's war policy. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Thank you very kindly for your heartwarming applause. Someone has said that when an audience applauds you before you speak, that represents faith. When they applaud in the middle of your speech, that represents hope. And when they applaud at the end, that represents love. So you have demonstrated great faith today, and I certainly want to appreciate your very heartwarming applause. I need not pause to say how very delighted I am to have the privilege of coming to this great institution of learning and the privilege of discussing with you some of the vital issues of our day. No one can overlook the fact that the University of California is one of the truly great universities of our world. I think one of the great needs in our world today, and certainly in our nation, is for the revolution of values. And I, for one, appreciate the fact that you here at Berkeley have constantly reminded all of us and our whole nation that we must review our values. And I would also like to express my deep personal appreciation to you as a civil rights leader for the support that you as a university and a concerned student body have given to the civil rights struggle. As there can be no gainsaying of the fact that America has brought the nation and the world to an awe-inspiring threshold of the future. We have built machines that think and instruments that peer into the unfathomable ranges of interstellar space. We have built gigantic buildings to kiss the skies and gargantuan bridges to span the seas. Through our spaceships, we have carved the highways through the stratosphere. Through our airplanes, we've dwarfed distance and placed time in chains. And through our submarines, we have penetrated oceanic depths. And this is a dazzling picture of our nation's scientific and technological progress. But when we look to the other side, something basic is missing. Our nation suffers from a kind of poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. Yes, we've learned to fly the air like birds. We've learned to swim the seas like fish. And yet we have not learned the simple art of walking the earth as brothers and sisters. Henry David Thoreau talked once about improved means to an unimproved end. And so often we have allowed the means by which we live. Talk about this afternoon evils that must be dealt with and problems that must be solved if we are to go on positively and creatively in the days ahead. Racial injustice is still the black man's burden and America's shame. This problem exists today because many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship over black Americans. This is one of the great problems that we find today. Now, in the struggle to get rid of racial injustice, there has been some progress, and I would not want to overlook this. For in assault after assault, the movement has profoundly shaken the entire edifice of legal segregation. And I need not go into the movements from the Montgomery bus boycott right on up through the Selma movement of 1965. Movements which literally subpoenaed the conscience of a large segment of the nation to appear before the judgment seat of morality on the whole question of civil rights. But in spite of this, we must recognize that the plant of freedom has grown only a bud and not yet a flower. We must see that the struggle is much more difficult now. For well now 12 years, the civil rights struggle dealt with a system of legal segregation and the syndrome of deprivation and exploitation surrounding this system. Many things were done during those years that we will remember as long as the cords of memory shall lengthen. But what we must see today is that with Selma and the Voting Rights Act, one phase of development in the civil rights revolution came to an end. Now a new phase has opened. And this new phase is a struggle for genuine equality. Now, in the phase that has now passed, the achievements were obtained at bargain rates. It didn't cost the nation anything to integrate lunch counters. No expenses were involved. No taxes were involved. It didn't cost the nation anything to integrate libraries, motels, and hotels. It didn't cost the nation anything to guarantee the right to vote. Now we are dealing with issues that will cost the nation something in terms of billions of dollars. And the other thing that we must see is that we are now dealing with issues that will demand a radical redistribution of economic and political power. The allies who went with us in the first phase are going in this phase. Many of the people meant that America was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor while refusing to undergird its black peasants who were brought here in chains from Africa with the same kind of economic floor. And therefore, emancipation for the Negro was freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without bread to eat, without land to cultivate. It was freedom and famine at the same time. In 1875, the nation passed a civil rights bill and refused to enforce it. In 1964, the nation passed an even weaker civil rights bill, and even to this day, it has not been enforced in all of its dimensions. In 1954, the Supreme Court declared segregation unconstitutional in the public schools. And now we find ourselves 12 or 13. And so we must not allow anybody to take our eyes from the real problem. there were no chance of black power, when 4 innocent, unoffending, beautiful Negro girls were killed in a church in Birmingham, Alabama, and nothing has been done about it to this very day. We must see the problem where it is. The problem is that white America, and I don't mean all white Americans, but white America has never solidly committed itself on the question of racial justice. And it means that now we must gird our courage. And those who are committed to the struggle for justice and freedom must work harder than ever before. For I'd assure you that we need this kind of activity and this kind of work more than we had it even in the first phase. I know that we're going through a period where there are understandable suspicions in some segments of the Negro community concerning monstrous octopus. It extends its nagging, prehensile tentacles in villages and cities all over our nation, and in the same breath contend that they are not racist. All of these things reveal that the white backlash is nothing new. The fact is that America has been backlashing on the question of fundamental human rights for its black citizens for more than 300 years. Years later, with less than 5% of the Negro students of the Deep South attending integrated schools, and if it continues at this pace, it will take another 97 years to integrate the public schools of the South. Suburban politicians talk eloquently against open housing, and at the same time, some 40 million of our brothers and sisters are poverty-stricken. Many of them go to bed hungry at night. I've seen them with my own eyes. I've lived with them in the ghettos of our nation. Some of them are Indians, some are Mexican Americans, some are Puerto Rican, some are Appalachian whites. And the largest group in proportion to its size in the population is the American Negro. Negroes and poor people generally find themselves today smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society. Now something must be done about this. Something must be done about it quickly. When we look at the Negro community, for an instance, we are facing a major depression every day. The unemployment rate among Negroes is set forth by the Labor Department at 8.4%. Unemployment in the nation generally is about 4%. But they don't deal with all of the facts because they are dealing with statistics that can be gathered as a result of people who've been in the labor market and those who still go to the employment office to try to find work. But they aren't dealing with the hundreds and thousands of discouraged Negroes, many of whom have lost hope. They've had so many doors closed in their faces. They've come to conclude that life is a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. They've lost motivation. There may be another 7 or 8% in that category, which means that the unemployment rate among Negroes may well be 16%. And among some young people, among the youth in the Negro community in some cities, it goes up as high as 35 and 40%. If the nation as a whole confronted what the Negro is presently confronting economically, we would be in a major depression more staggering than the depression of the 30s. And it's not only unemployment. Most of the poor people are working every day but earning so little money. Estimated the other day that we spend $500,000 to kill every enemy soldier in Vietnam. And when you look at the other side, it's tragic. We spend only $53 a year for every person that's considered poverty-stricken, and half of that goes for salaries for those who are not poor. The question is, what are we trying to win today? I'm afraid that the administration of our nation is more concerned about winning an unwinnable war in Vietnam than about winning the war against poverty right here at home. Now this leads me to the next evil. It is the evil of war. And nowhere is this evil expressed today more than in the tragic, unjust, evil war in Vietnam. It's tragic that we got in it from the very beginning. As Professor ℌ𝔞𝔫𝔕 has said, this tragic war is a product of a gigantic miscalculation that the world after 1945 was and would remain divided into two great blocks, one representing light and the other darkness, and that we who represented the light stood at Armageddon and battled for the Lord. Somehow we moved right on with those miscalculations. This war is the product of a gigantic miscalculation about China and about Asia, probably the largest and most fearful miscalculation in diplomatic history. The notion that Chiang Kai-shek represented the true China, that the communists did not represent China and were not really here to stay and need not therefore be recognized. It was as if Britain and France had gone on recognizing the Confederacy as the legitimate government of the United States 20 years after Appomattox. It is the product of an almost demonic delusion that we were not only called upon to set and keep the rest of the world straight, but that we had the material, intellectual, and moral resources to do this. It is a product of grave miscalculations that because we were a world power, we had power and could use it everywhere in the world. And out of this melancholy body of obsessions and miscalculations have come those notions now so familiar that we, not the United Nations, are the peacekeeping instrument of the modern world. Once accept these assumptions almost paranoid in their sweep and vastness, and our war in Vietnam takes on a kind of nightmarish logic. This war has all of the dimensions of a Greek tragedy. And oh, it has done so much damage to our nation. Vietnam and ending that war are venal in its time to come home from Vietnam. Another casualty of the war in Vietnam is the humility of our nation. Through rugged determination, scientific and technological progress, as I mentioned earlier, we have become the richest and most powerful nation in the world. But honestly impels me to admit that our power has often made us arrogant. We feel that our money can do anything. We arrogantly feel that we have everything to teach other nations and nothing to learn from them. We often arrogantly feel that we have some divine messianic mission to police the whole world. We are arrogant in not allowing young nations to go through the same growing pains, turbulence, and revolution that characterized our own history. We are arrogant in our contention that we have some sacred mission to protect people from totalitarian rule, while we make little use of our power to end the evils of South Africa and Rhodesia. Are the problems facing our nation and facing mankind. The other thing about this war in Vietnam is that it has increased the possibilities of all-out nuclear warfare, and therefore it has increased the possibilities of the destruction of all mankind. And I must say to you honestly this afternoon, and I'm sad to say it, but I fear that the clouds of the Third World War are hovering mighty low. And if there is a Third World War which can destroy the whole of mankind, our government will have to take the chief responsibility for making this a reality. Talking with people about the war in Vietnam, giving them the facts about the war, developing statistics on the number of people opposed to the war. And the aim is to build a powerful peace bloc that can really have influence in the 1968 elections. And we must make it clear that we aren't going to let our political forces and the politicians ignore Vietnam in 1968. This must be an issue if that tragic war is still going on. And so as the war hawks escalate the war in Vietnam, we must escalate our protest against the war. A reporter said to me the other day, Dr. King, don't you think you're hurting your influence? Don't you think by taking a stand against the war in Vietnam, you are losing many people who once respected you? They will no longer listen to you now. Don't you think you must kind of move back, go more toward the administration's policy? And I looked at this reporter and said, I'm sorry, sir, but you don't know me. I'm not a consensus leader. So as I move toward my conclusion, let me say that there is a need in our country for a kind of creative discontent. There are certain technical words that are used in every academic discipline. They soon become stereotypes and cliches. Every academic discipline has its technical nomenclature. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. And certainly we all want to live as far as possible the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But I must say to you this afternoon that there are some things in our nation and in the world of which I'm proud to be maladjusted, and to which I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted until the good society is realized. I never intend to adjust myself to racial segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism. But in a day when Sputniks and explorers and Geminis are dashing through outer space and guided ballistic missiles are carving highways of death through the stratosphere, no nation can win if that is a world war. And we must come to see now that the alternative to disarmament, the alternative to a greater suspension of nuclear tests, the alternative to strengthening the United Nations and thereby disarming the whole world, may well be a civilization plunged into the abyss of annihilation, and our earthly habitat will be transformed into an inferno that even the mind of Dante could not envision. It may well be that our world is in dire need of a new organization, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment. Desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man, into the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice. And somehow, I still have faith that keeps me going through these difficult days. I hope that we will develop the coalition of conscience that will solve this problem. I'll tell you why I have the faith, and it is because of universities like this, with thousands of young people, black and white, who have the new vision that we need in this age. And so I haven't lost faith in the future. I think we're going to reach the goal that we seek. And so I can still sing "We Shall Overcome." I know many can't sing it now, but I can still sing it because I believe the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome. Join hands right in this nation and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
and gentlemen, we meet today at the most difficult and crucial period in the history of the whole nation. But in a way, it's a period of hope. I was imbued with some hope as I listened to Miss Offa as she spoke, because here's a child of the black revolution in our country. Here's a child of the new self-assertion on the part of black people in the United States. I also was filled with hope as I looked out upon you, because those militants and radicals at Berkeley are in a real sense the child of the black revolution too. Your free speech movement of some time ago was a direct derivative of the fight that black people and their allies were waging in the South some years ago. Now the movement of black people has moved into a new phase. In the past, we've been mobilizing. Now we are seeking to organize. And that organization has brought about confusion in the minds of many people as to what we are aiming at. We are called racists. We are called black racists or segregationists in reverse. I don't know what kind of segregationist that is. But brothers and sisters, let me tell you that the movement of black people in the country now is just at the stage of translating the phony victories of the past into meaningful change in the life situation of the average black man in the United States. I get sick and tired of hearing of all of the progress that we have made in the past. That progress has been minuscule. It is true that black people who have a little money and who have a little education have greater upward mobility today than they had 13 years ago when the so-called civil rights revolution began. The black PhD has it made, in a way. He finds that he's still black, of course, but he will be offered jobs by universities all over the country. I'm now teaching at Lincoln University, a, quote, predominantly Negro university, unquote, in Pennsylvania. And at the end of the school year, the top quarter of the graduating class was barraged with offers from industry. Every company was looking for its highly qualified, highly skilled, educated, highly personable young black man. You know, everyone must have one now. And a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine called me and said, "You know what, Jim?" Said, "I just got a big job with a big corporation, starting out at $12,000 a year." And he said, "And I don't have to do nothing except sit close to the door and look very Negro." He called me last week and said he got fired because he wasn't dark enough. They needed greater visibility than they had. Well, this is the token Negro, you know. But I don't knock it. I don't knock that at all, really. Because it's at least one foot in the door, and many people have fought and died for that dubious privilege of having the token Negro there. My point, however, is that the little fellow, the little black man in the streets of the ghettos, north and south in our country, is precisely where he was before the so-called civil rights revolution began. In fact, relatively speaking, he is worse off. Relatively speaking, his plight has deteriorated. The gap between his average income and the average income of the rest of America has widened and is still widening. Unemployment among whites in our country is declining, according to the Department of Labor, but unemployment among black people is increasing. The thrust of the civil rights movement a few years ago was aimed at knocking down the barriers of segregation. But look at it. Segregation has been increasing while people were dying and going to jail. There's more residential segregation now than there ever was. Now, black people are saying we've got to add something new to this struggle. No longer will the appeal to conscience be enough. And that's what the movement has been based upon in the past. Saying, please,
Let me stimulate your conscience. Let you see the great evils that have been done to us. And hopefully you will change. It has not worked. The appeal to conscience has found that racism has no conscience. Now, but whatever conscience is, that conscience can be created if the people who are oppressed learn to manipulate and to wield those forces of power within our country. For example, the businessman discovers a conscience when he finds that unless he changes his practices, he's going to lose money. The politician finds a conscience when he discovers that he will not get elected unless he changes his policy.
Wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. Right in the office. Wait a minute. Are you under arrest? Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest? You place him under arrest. Go ahead, brother. Am I under arrest? Am I? Take your hands off me if I'm not under arrest. Am I under arrest? I'm telling you to take your hands off me. Is he under arrest? Take your hands off me. Oh.
Black people have lost their lives. 50 million black people have lost their lives. The anti-lynch laws didn't come into effect until 5,000 black people had been lynched. No white man has ever been executed for raping a black woman. Yet black men have been lynched and castrated because they supposedly or did rape white women. The time has come when young people should begin to ask questions about what is going on around you. You have to start watching your police, turning in their badge numbers, and getting rid of the racist cops. Now, the case of ℌ𝔬𝔳 is the second cause that I have to talk about, because no cop has ever been made to stand trial for unjustifiably killing a black man. No one has moved in this direction so that you don't have to bear that kind of guilt on your conscience as Caucasians that have the power to change the power structure by the things you say and the things you do. We want to win the case of ℌ𝔬𝔳 and have Officer Bronkhurst stand trial for shooting a lone man down 6 times with a riot gun and once in the back of the head. Now you can hear me say this for the next year, and still you get little or no response from you. Those are your policemen. They are not the black man's friends. And those hippies that say that they're not my friend either, to simply withdraw and grow beards and make love, that don't straighten the police out either. You have to move in a direction that is going to bring about some kind of positive action. Now, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense moved to arm themselves and arm the communities, not to go out and shoot up white people on the right and the left of them, but to keep the police in check. Because the police don't care if they hit a man, woman, or child. They simply show their strength by this. I am currently associate editor of a new magazine called The Bay Viewer, which I would hope that you would look for on your stand. My slogan for it is, save yourself a trip to the ghettos, because it tells you what's happening. The Black Panther Party needs your support because they're going to have to still gather $5,000 bail. After that, have a court trial where they get completely exonerated for having committed no crime at all. I hope that you will think about what they were trying to do and not be so frightened by the potential you feel they might do.
Of the Post newspaper in Berkeley. We'd like to know, how do you account for the fact that there's such a small reception for you?
Oh, I don't speak to receptions. I speak to people.
Do you feel that you will be able to get back to Congress soon?
Well, I'm going to have a press conference inside. We can answer questions then.
Good enough.
What kind of a democracy is this when just last night in San Francisco, which prides itself as being a sophisticated town, they arrested 52 students for protesting at the Fairmont Hotel against Dean Rusk's appearance there in favor of the war. They had a right to protest. This is the ferment that has brought America thus far. Every human being has the right to protest. This is what I have been doing, and this is why I'm in the place that I am today. Black power, my friends, means that we are developing now a new breed of cats. You know, when you read the Bible and you hear about old Daniel going in the lion's den, the Bible is so old, and the mythology of the Bible is not exact. When they lowered Daniel down in that lion's den, they might have been Black Panthers down there. And the Black Panthers, you see, saw old Daniel coming down, and they took their paw and yawned and said, here comes another one of the new breed of cats. We're a new breed of cats. New breed of cats. We are finished with the old things. We have pushed them behind. See, they already took care of Whitney Young. He's the Wall Street of the civil rights movement. And poor old Roy Wilkins, he's on his last legs. And Phil Randolph, who was a great man, he's very ill. And there was no one left except dear old Martin Luther. And Martin came down to confess his sins to Big Daddy. And Martin is no longer totally committed to nonviolence. No. And you know, I'm a Baptist, you see. We put the convert on the bench, and they sit there until they see the light. We call it the mourner's bench, you see. So I got Martin Luther on the mourner's bench. And one day we might make a man out of him, you know that? Might take the halo off his head. So whether you like our leaders or not, we got them. We got our Stokely Carmichaels. Yes. We got our Rap Browns. We had our Malcolm X. We got our Floyd McKissick. And you got the old man of the sea. We are living today in not a great society. We're living today in a sick society. This is a sick society. And we young people, I noticed the word we, and I'll be 60 years old this year, baby. Keep the faith and spread it gently, but save a little for me. And
this tyranny.
All power to the people. Black power to black people. White power to white people. Okay? You haven't had white power, you've had pig power.
All right!
If you had white power, you wouldn't have those pigs inflicting power upon you right now. Here at the University of California, as long as the faculty members, as long as the students can tolerate my profanity.
And I think the faculty is stand up against this. But I would also say that I found that the performance of Mr. Cleaver today here on this campus and on other campus was a disgrace. And I would like to point out that the great majority of students who were standing out here when Mr. Cleaver made his appeal about chanting the phrase that he did about Governor Reagan did not join in on it. That's right. There's nothing smart about dirty language. Mr. Cleaver ought to get over his obsession with obscenities. This doesn't add to the conversation.
There's nothing dirty.
Mr. Cleaver has a very good point to make. He's a very eloquent man. But I think that this obsession with obscenity, pornography, talk about guns, his statement yesterday that Governor Wallace ought to be assassinated, this is not part of the discussion. I support Mr. Cleaver's right. I think he should lecture on this campus, but I think his performance was disgraceful.
The crowd was large as expected, and the response was warm as expected. For many, this was their first time to hear Eldridge Cleaver speak in person. Now the real test begins. They'll have to evaluate whether they want a direct confrontation with the Regents over Eldridge Cleaver's right to lecture here at Cal. Belva Davis for Eyewitness News at UC Berkeley.
Shut you away from the regular channels, when they lock the doors, when they don't let you into the buildings, you have no other recourse but to take it to the streets or to the plaza. Even the property that they have, these big fat businessmen who sit on the Board of Regents, that doesn't belong to them either. They just don't know that yet. We didn't want to come up here and talk about hanging Reagan. I don't want to hang that punk. I want to challenge him to a duel. Now, and I reiterate that challenge. And I will allow him to choose his own weapon. Choose anything. He can choose anything from a gun, a knife, to a baseball bat, and he can choose a marshmallow, and I'll beat him to death with that.
Police brutality. What is going on in America? When will it stop? I was talking to my colleague yesterday, who is the mother of 3 boys, 3 sons, 3 young men, and she shared with me that one of her sons has been pulled over 100 times. He drives with his driver's license on the passenger seat because he doesn't want to have to go into his pocket. No one should have to live like this. No one should have to fear a siren. No one should have to fear lights in their rearview mirror. I wish I had something profound to tell you, but I don't. But what I do know is this, that they should have no peace and they should have no justice until we have it. I do believe that every day that we raise our voices, every day that those of you who are engaged in social media keep it alive, every day that you attend a rally, every day that you send a note to your representative, it makes a difference. And unfortunately, because we live in this moment of immediate results, immediate gratification, we want a movement to have immediate and quick results. And it doesn't work like that. We are in it for the long road. We have to be. And it may not happen in our lifetime, but we still have to fight for what is right.